All right, welcome back to the second episode of the Ace for Ashlyn podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about what happens when your students have forgotten how to school. Happens to the best of us, and I feel like there are certain seasons in the school year where this just comes out more than others. So, for example, my first year teaching, October was the longest month of my life, and I was like, what is going on? What is in the water? What is wrong with me? Why can I not do this? And why does it feel like every day is 72 hours long? And then I realized October in and of itself is one of those seasons that's just exceptionally hard to get through, and everybody is just feeling burnt out. There are other parts of the school year too where it's just as hard. I feel like coming back from breaks, sometimes students forget how to school. Mayhem, which I also heard, another story. I also heard May coined as mayhem, and I was like, what are you talking about? As this naive first year teacher. And then 3 days into the month of May, I was like, oh, I understand now. So there are seasons in the school year that are harder to get through than others. So I am going to give you 9 hacks for things you can do when you feel like your class is starting to lose it and you can see the shiz rapidly approaching the fan. Up first, we have using bell ringers. I think bell ringers are do nows. I think that different schools have different names for them, but it's basically the first thing that students do when they enter your classroom. So for me, it's typically a grammar thing in the afternoon. In the mornings, I might have more of a reading or a vocabulary based activity. But when my students come in the room, right off the bat, there is something that they need to do. Going off of that, you also should have a game plan or an itinerary, a schedule for the day projected or written out so students can see what's going to happen. There's nothing worse than going to a meeting or a lecture or anything where you are just at the liberty of the presenter. Think the worst faculty meetings you've had where there's no agenda and then one person just keeps talking and talking and talking. Our students don't want that either. So giving them a clear-cut guideline of what's going to happen makes your class predictable, which is going to make students behave better as well. Number 3, review your expectations. Now, you don't need to review these expectations in a very corny way. When I first started teaching, I was so corny when it came to reviewing expectations. I was like, all right, friends, this is what we don't do. This is what we do. You can't say this is what we do when you teach 4th grade because then you lose everybody. So it was just very corny. It was me just standing up there talking about things. It just felt very juvenile. Now that I've moved up to middle school, I no longer do that. Here's what I do instead to review the expectations. I'm like, listen, when you come into the classroom, you guys know what you got to do. You're going to make sure you are entering well. What's it look like? Yep. All right. We're going to make sure being respectful. What's that look like? Yep. No, it doesn't look like that. Yes, it looks like that. Then finally, what does it look like when we leave the classroom? Yep. Making it more of a conversation base, throwing something around the room, being able to laugh a little bit too and just have fun. It makes the review less monotonous, and it also makes it so that your students can't deny it and be like, what? I didn't know that we couldn't do that when they do something outrageous. Review the expectations. Additionally, number 4, make sure you are also doing expectation checks. So what I mean is if you are doing centers, check in after each center, especially if the classroom is a little bit more lit than usual. Make sure you are checking in and you're like, okay, this is what we actually need to do. I know this group did an awesome job doing that. Something that we could work on is this. Also, when you're doing those expectation checks, try to balance out the positives to negatives, or honestly, ideally, you would do 5 positives to 1 more of a negative behavior thing. So maybe shout out a handful of students who you saw doing an awesome job, and then something that you saw that you liked, and then be like, okay, but this time we're going to work on getting to our center quickly or operating quieter, whatever it is, but try to enforce the expectations frequently throughout the class and make sure they're being met. And also when giving feedback on how they're being met, try to balance out the positives with the negatives, or if you can, do that 5-to-1 ratio. All right, so what do you do when shiz goes sideways? Number 5, this is for when you know that things are about to go down. You know that meme of the woman who's standing on the cliff and she's looking at this big wave rapidly approaching her, and she's just there with her visor yeah. You know that moment in the classroom. So when you feel like you are that woman and things are about to go sideways, here's what you can do. Stop everything. I know that sounds dramatic. That's fine. But seriously, stop everything and regulate yourself first as the teacher. I kid you not, there have been days where I'm like, guys, stop. I need 2 minutes with nobody talking to me. If you want to read, you want to doodle, you want to work on your work, whatever. But I need the lights off and 2 minutes silence. Not your fault. I need to do this for myself. All right? All right. And my class will work for 2 minutes and it's fine. And then during those 2 minutes, I breathe. I do some deep breathing. I channel the inner yogi I didn't know I had. And then after I feel regulated, then I address the class. And we start off by talking about what I see that they are doing well, what I think their need might be based on the behavior that I'm seeing, what I can do to help them, but what I need in return for them to do to help me run our classroom. That formula works great. Use the formula. Number 6, have a plan for when expectations are not met. And I feel like I talk about this all the time, but we know kids are going to make mistakes. People make mistakes. That's what we do. So when the expectations are not met, what are you going to do about it? If you go into your classroom with a predetermined plan of how you're going to handle a behavior, automatically much easier. Also, if you were listening and not watching that was chef's kiss right there. Mwah. Chef's kiss. It is so much easier, so much less anxiety producing if you can go into the classroom with a plan on how you're going to handle a situation. If you want a resource to help you plan for when shiz goes sideways, I do have a free resource I'm going to be sending out to my email list next time I send out the whole email. So if you want that, feel free to click the link in the description box or in whatever avenue you are watching this in, and you can subscribe to my email. So I try to send out a lot of freebies and fun things and stuff like that. Anyways, end of the plug for the email list. Number 7 is changing the lens in which you view problematic, air quotes around that, problematic behaviors. So when you see a student is doing something, maybe they're being defiant, maybe they're calling out, whatever it is, view it through a lens of trying to learn and through empathy, as opposed to, oh my gosh, little Johnny, you would pick right now to start this stuff, huh? Easier said than done. I know. But all behavior is coming from something. It's an expression of something going on beneath the surface. And so as the adult in the situation, we should be the ones to help the student work through that emotion and then manage that behavior. You can also look at the overarching behaviors that you see your students struggling with and think about what life skills there might be a deficit in, especially post-COVID. If you are in the classroom still, you know how different it is being a teacher right now. So think about the life skills your students might need extra support or learning in, and then create mini lessons or other ways to teach those skills. And I know there's an argument too about we're teachers, we're not supposed to teach these skills, but our job is to help raise little humans into bigger humans and to equip them with skills to succeed in life, and being able to handle emotions, that's one of them. Drop mic. No, not really. This is expensive, actually. I don't want to hurt you. I'm so sorry, microphone. Quick story time. One of the ways I have taught SEL to my students in these life lesson kind of ways was pretty random, and it came from me just being completely exhausted last year. But I was meeting with my family at an Italian restaurant after school one day, and I was like, you know what? I am so over this and telling my students what I need from them not listening. I am going to have them be the teacher and see what it's like. And this, honestly, was one of the best things I have ever done in my entire teaching career. It transformed how the class operated. It transformed how the students viewed teachers and how they view their class time, because the next day they came into the class, they saw our game plan, but they saw that it was completely blank. And I went over responsibilities that they were going to have when it came to planning their lesson, implementing their lesson, managing behaviors. It was fantastic. I had people answering the phone, sending emails. They had to call admin for some student behaviors, keeping track of the bathrooms. It was beautiful. And then the students realized just how much work goes into being a teacher and why they should pay attention and not act like a fool in class. And to this day, I still have students talk to me about it from last year. And it's one of my top selling resources on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I stand by it. I think it is such an awesome lesson. It's called Teacher Off Duty in case you're interested in looking at it. But any lesson like that where you can teach students the life skills, you can show them what it's like where they're actually modeling and doing things and learning authentically, and it's not just you lecturing, that's the stuff that can make make a big difference in students' lives and in your overall classroom behavior system and in your classroom climate overall. Anyway, so a quick story. In my class this year, my students have been having a hard time with their executive functioning skills. If you are in like a middle school classroom right now, I would be very curious to hear the same thing. I feel like the COVID gaps in 4th grade and 3rd grade and 5th grade, like that really took a toll on the executive functioning of our current 6th graders. So anyways, in my classroom, my kiddos are struggling with executive functioning. So what do? I bring in the social worker. I bring in anybody with a pulse who has skills in that area. And I'm like, please talk to my students. Give me the resources. Give me this. Give me that. I did my own learning too. And unfortunately, a lot of the executive functioning resources out there are extremely elementary. And I'm like, I can't really do that with my 6th graders because they're going to eat me alive. So instead, what I did was kind of my own spin-off on some of the strategies I've seen. And it is having a question person. This is beautiful, by the way. Take notes. If you can take notes on this right now, like you're not driving, this is one of the best things I've done all year. I kid you not. So for my question person, it is a job. I pick 1 or 2 people every week and they do all of the class jobs. We call it weekly worker. And one of the new added responsibilities is being the question person. So what the question person does is when I tell the class directions or I say something, and ordinarily I'd have like 12 hands being like, what's happening? Where are we? What are we doing? What's happening? What are the directions? You didn't teach me this. What's happening? And you get like the seagulls, you know? When that happens, I'm like, ask the question person. So before I'm done going over my directions and releasing the class, I check in with those 1 or 2 people. And I'm like, all right, can you repeat back the directions to me? Then the entire class gets to hear the directions again. I make sure they know what's going on. And then I release the class. And any questions that kids would ordinarily direct at me, I'm like, oh, and this is brilliant. Number 1, because it takes the pressure off of you as a teacher. Number 2, it shows the students just how many people don't pay attention sometimes. And number 3, especially after they are the question person, they do a much better job with actually paying attention because they're like, oh, wait, I should listen to this right now. Like that teacher, they're telling me things for me, not for them. So try a question person. And if you do try it out and it ends up working for you or not working for you, let me know. Very curious to hear how that goes in your room. All right, number 8 is teaching the why behind certain things and embedding mini SEL lessons when you can. So another example, another story. In my class this year, we're having a pretty hard time with empathy. And so I made this lesson with 3 boxes, and they were just empty boxes, all the same size from over the summer, packing up classrooms, all that. I had these 3 boxes, and in the 3 boxes, I put different items. So in one box, I put a few crumpled up balls of paper. In the second box, I put a handful of books. In the third box, I loaded it with like my teacher textbooks, the heavy duty things. So I had these 3 boxes on the carpet. The kids didn't know what was in them. And I had 3 volunteers carry the boxes. And their only rule was, while they were doing these random challenges I just created off the top of my head, their only rule was that they cannot put their box down. So they had to do things like walk around the room 3 times. They had to grab some papers. They had to sharpen a pencil. And then the last challenge was picking up a bigger tote with one hand with one hand while also holding their box. And it was amazing. There were so many learning opportunities throughout this entire activity, down to some students helping them, some students like looking away when you could obviously see that the person holding the heavier box was struggling. And I also made this scene too, because I was like, move faster. Why are you dropping things? Why are you not moving fast enough? Get over here. What are you doing? And just being a jerk. But the kids knew I was joking. And at the end of the activity, we had the students empty out their boxes and show what was on the inside. And the moral was that everybody's carrying their own invisible burden that you know nothing about. And you're not going to be able to tell from the outside, but there are certain things that you can say and do that can make their life easier or significantly harder. So for example, me telling the student with the heavy box to hurry up, move faster, do this, do that. The student was talking and they were like, yeah, it just made me even more stressed out. It was harder to focus and carry my box. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of how it is in life too. So that lesson was super impactful. And actually I want to like make it into like a resource I can share with you guys that's easier than just rebuilding it on your own. So hopefully that will come in the next couple of weeks. Couldn't be called the box lesson. But having lessons like that takes only a couple of minutes, but it can send a meaningful point home to your students, super important. That can change the entire climate of your classroom. It can change your management style completely. Teaching our students the why behind what we do I think that's kind of why we're all here. That's what this podcast is here anyways. All right. And finally, and arguably my most important tip is to make sure that you yourself as the teacher are being consistent. And now I feel like the word consistent has become a bit more of like a trigger word in education lately, because when you have a problem, people are like, oh, have you been consistent? But here's what I mean by that. With the behavior management system I'm using in the classroom right now, it's called Levels. But with this behavior management system, it's my responsibility to track how frequently we are meeting the behaviors or if we're not, or meeting the expectations or if we're not meeting the expectations. And we also do this at the end of class. So it's my responsibility to reflect back on the class period with my students and be like, okay, were we actually respectful? Here's what I observed. What did you see? And making sure I'm doing that every single class was hard. Like, I thought I was pretty good at consistency, but when I actually have to like check every single day if I'm doing it, man, it shows you where you struggle. So making sure that you are being consistent in these next 3 things is game changing when it comes to helping your students out when they have forgotten how to school. So number 1, are you being consistent in what you expect from your students? Are you being consistent in what you enforce with your students? And are you being consistent in what you let slide with your students or when you let things slide? If you make like a 3T chart, I don't know if that's what it's called. Sounds good. If you make like a 3T chart, you know what I'm talking about? If you make one of those with those categories and jot down, take like 5 minutes, it'll open up your eyes and you'll be like, ooh, maybe I should do that a little bit better. And the good thing about that is that those are things in our control as a teacher. You know, we can't go into our students' bodies and make them do anything. We can't make them listen to us. We can't make them do one single thing. They have to make that choice on their own. We can create the systems and the structures to make them want to do those things. But yeah, we can only control us, fam. So if you take a few minutes to actually jot down how consistent you are in regards to what you expect, what you enforce, and then what you let slide and when you let it slide, you can change how you operate and you can make your classroom operate in a more structured, more predictable way where expectations are extremely clear and they're being consistently enforced. So how did I do? What hacks do you think I should have added to this list to help you and your students when they have forgotten how to school and behaviors are getting a little bit out of control? What else would you recommend? I would love to continue this conversation in the comments on social media or in my messages, my emails, or if you are able to comment if you're watching this on YouTube, that'd also be awesome. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about this stuff all day. That's why I made the podcast about it. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day and thank you for listening and watching. I already feel like on episode 2, I'm getting better at this. Like I'm finding my podcaster voice and I'm excited to keep learning and growing and creating with you. All right, that's it. As always, friends, you've got this. I feel like I should have like an exit song. Da 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 da. That's the podcast. I don't think that's it. Bye.